Today we're going to be talking about the chemical attacks that are happening all the time in every single one of my aquariums and in yours. We'll discuss whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing or a little bit of both, and then we'll tie it back to this aquarium and why we always want to have a planted tank that has really healthy, actively growing plants. But first, today's video is sponsored by Amino. Amino is a free mobile app for iOS and Android that contains millions of user-generated communities, and you guessed it, there's more than a few that are centered around aquariums and fish keeping. In the past, I've asked you guys to join the Fishkeepers Amino group, but today it's all about the Fishkeepers Amino. Once you create a profile, you'll be able to interact with tons of people via sharing pictures of your tank, asking for advice, and helping others by answering polls and much more. So here's a little challenge for you. Download the app if you haven't already, join the Fishkeepers Amino, add me, my username is AQUAPROS of course, and then post a picture of your tank on my profile wall. In a week from now, I'll pick my favorite tank and share the picture with proper credits over on my Instagram. To participate in the challenge, just follow the link in the description or top comment, download the app, and get started. So what's this deal with attacks happening in your aquarium? It sounds kind of clickbaity, sounds kind of weird, but it is something that's happening in all of our aquariums. Allelopathy is a phenomenon that I first learned about, I want to say like 4 or 5 years ago, when I got a copy of Diana Wallstad's book, The Ecology of the Planted Aquarium. Highly recommend it to anybody who's even close to being a planted tank nerd, somebody who just wants to learn new things about aquariums. This is just a great source to get it from. It's a little science heavy. At the time, I think I was about to go into grad school, so I was used to that kind of reading, but it's something that I think a lot of people that aren't used to science stuff can still read and enjoy. Anyway, allelopathy, as described in this book, is essentially the chemical defense system that plants and algae use to defend themselves when they're in an environment similar to an aquarium. It's something that happens in the wild too, but obviously we have a contained system here. It's a little bit different, but these same things are happening. I do need to say, and Diana actually says this in her book as well, that allelopathy is something that, while it's happening all the time, it's something that doesn't always have an impact that we can see or interpret. So if something weird is going on in your tank, don't run and use this as an excuse. It's probably something else, but this is something that I think you should still know about. So what our plants are doing is that they're releasing these alleochemicals. They're these small phenolic compounds that resemble kind of like humic acid, but like a chopped up version of it. And these are chemicals that can inhibit the growth of other plants and other algae. An important thing to note about the release of these chemicals is that it typically only happens in plants that are growing actively and have enough energy to devote to that pathway to produce these extra metabolites. So in a tank like this, where I have, it's kind of hard to see now, you'll see it in a minute, I have a lot of Monte Carlo that's kind of dying off, not doing well. That's not going to be a plant that's producing these alleochemicals that can inhibit other plants and algae. However, the Japan clover in this tank seems to be doing pretty well, and it is actively growing. It's been taking over this tank. That's a plant that's probably producing a fair amount of alleochemicals. Now in this tank, there's obviously not enough of an influence of these chemicals to inhibit algae. There's still algae in this aquarium, but it could just be that the range of chemicals that are being produced by the plants in this aquarium are in fact inhibiting a different type of algae. We just don't know. And as described in the book, this can go both ways. Certain types of algae can also release chemicals that inhibit certain types of plants. Furthermore, certain plants have been shown to inhibit other types of plants. An example of this that's used in the book is that jungle val seemed to inhibit the growth of duckweed, which, I mean, we all have a love-hate relationship, mostly a hate relationship with duckweed, so that's something interesting. I've never had the two growing together, so I can't say that I've seen that, but it's something that's referenced in the book, and maybe some of you guys have noticed as well. Unfortunately, there's not a ton of examples of like what specific plants inhibit what types of algae and things like that. We're just not there yet. All of the scientific research on this stuff also is done primarily with plants that aren't typical aquarium plants that we commonly use, so there are limitations to this information, but it is a phenomenon that's happening, and it's definitely happening in pretty much all of our tanks. There's several more layers to this allelopathy thing. I don't really think I want to talk about all of them today, but if you're interested in this and you want to have another video talking about this and dive into it like completely, let me know down in the comments below, and I'll consider making that soon. Anyway, this tank needs a little bit of help. I've definitely let it go. I didn't hate the sort of like jungly overgrown look that it had for a long time. You know, pair that with a little bit of laziness, let's be real. But now it's gotten to the point where the Japan clover is really just taken over. It's choking out a bunch of the Monte Carlo on the rocks. I can already tell that a lot of that is starting to die off. So we need to deal with that, and we need to kind of shape this tank back into something that's really worth spending a lot of time in front of. So hopefully that doesn't mean we have to completely rescape it, but let's see what we can do here to tidy it up a little bit. Alright, this is a secret for everybody that's made it to this point in the video, okay? Not everybody does, so this is your reward, okay? You can't go blabbing down in the comments letting people know what's going on, okay? So let's keep it hush-hush. But right now, I'm finishing up work on one of the 40 breeders downstairs, the last one, on the rack of 3, okay? The tank is a rework of the Avatar tank, and it's awesome, okay? I'm not saying when the video is coming out because I want it to be perfect, but you guys are going to love it, okay? The 125, I'm not going to say too much, but the name of the tank is going to be Ancient Gardens, and it's also going to be crazy. So that's your little reward for getting this far. Let's go ahead and let's check out this tank and talk about a couple more things. Now, I know it looks like we kind of just KO'd this tank. Like, it's pretty bad right now. Super yellow, cutting back all of the Monte Carlo and the baby tears, this kind of mix of carpet. It's going to just expose all of that plant material that hasn't seen the light of day, or these Phoenix clip-on lights, I should say. But give it time, it's going to come back and it's going to look great. Now, some stuff that I'm not super... I don't know how it's going to do. The Monte Carlo up here, you can tell it's pretty toasted. You know, that's what happens when you choke stuff out for too long. And I'm not super confident of its ability to come back, but we'll see. All right, and then up here, you know, I'm really liking the look, kind of the original look of the tank, because A, I can see the rocks, we can actually see the scape, and my Rotala that I put up here a long time ago is looking pretty good. So I definitely want to have that grow out a little bit more, and hopefully we can kind of keep the Japan clover to a minimum. It's just super invasive. Once it gets going, it's really hard to control. I also had to get the CO2 back going because the tank was empty. Also not something good that we want to have happen, but it's okay. So I also pulled out the lily pipes, gave them a good clean. So everything's looking really good. The filter down here is just one of these little Suns. I like them, you know, they're good, but it was just time to change out the media. Just the filter pad on the bottom, it was super clogged. So now we got good flow out of this thing. Just for your reference, I would like to have this propped up a little bit, but you run into an issue of you want to have surface agitation, but then it's kind of loud. So we just deal with it there, and it creates enough circulation to where the tank, you know, is getting everything that it needs. hopefully now all we have to do is just get back into like a good fertilizer regimen, and this tank should be bumping in, you know, just a few weeks. We should see all of this yellow disappear and we get nice new growth. And that kind of touches back on the allelopathy thing. Hopefully the combination of the plants out competing the algae for nutrients and maybe a little bit of allopathy effects here and there, this tank should be back to where it was at one point, which was looking pretty dang good. I think this does create an opportunity though to not do an experiment. I don't want to call it an experiment because it's not really one, but just do kind of like a before and after of the effects of using fertilizer and having good CO2 and light in your tank to get a rebound of plant growth. So I think that's going to be a video that comes down the line at some point, probably in a few weeks once this tank is back in action. Anyway guys, I think that's going to do it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Kind of all over the place. We did a few different things, but if you liked the video, make sure to throw a like on it and subscribe if you're new for frequent fish tank videos. We'll see you next time.